AskReddit by Anonymous0018. What is a little bombshell your therapist dropped in one of your sessions that completely changed your outlook? If you don't have these problems with any other person in your life, why do you think you're the problematic person in this one? I love this. I have a friend who I always seem to run into misunderstandings with. Every time we had a conversation, it somehow turned into a debate even if it was me talking about my day. The conversations were never easy. I always evaluate myself first and take into consideration his critiques. He was very good at convincing me that I was contradicting myself or wasn't good at communicating my thoughts. I never had this issue with anyone else in my life. I kept trying to figure out where the miscommunication was coming from. In the end, I just minimized contact and now I don't run into this issue. You can't control your emotions, but you can control what you do with them. At the time, I was a young adult who had learned zero healthy emotional regulation skills, only suppression and shaming, growing up, so this blew my mind. I had a therapist tell me feelings and facts, they are the reaction to facts. I've never forgotten that. Just because I reacted strongly to something doesn't alter the facts of what happened. For your information, I was raised that any disapproval was called yelling. I was a terrible partner because any disagreement meant my sir was yelling at me. They weren't. I was at a high stress time and I asked her how people live like this. She replied, oftentimes they have cardiac events. She said it as an urging to care for myself as much as possible. This makes me laugh cause I just find very direct replies like this to be so startlingly true and refreshing and needed. But it's nearly always the best advice you can get. I hit my friend with a similar one when she was asking how people manage to keep going when everything is a struggle, and I was like, they don't. They either don't struggle, or they don't keep going, and it's there. When we start burning that fuse by being in the wrong mental space environment, it's finite. It sounds to me like you are trying to convince yourself to stay with your girlfriend. I'm not so sure it should be so difficult. At the time he said this, I remember it was like he said the earth is flat. I thought he was crazy when he suggested relationships don't need to be difficult. But eventually I started to realize I was trying to change myself in order to stay with this person rather than just being who I am. It took me 3 more months to finally break up with her, but from that day on, I vowed to never again abandon myself just to be with someone I had convinced myself was better than me. Accepting something doesn't mean you have to like it. That took away a lot of my inner conflicts about situations because I could accept a situation without expending energy internally fighting against the injustice of it. It's called radical acceptance in DBT. Yes, you come to acceptance, but you don't have to like it or condone it. This allows one to grow. You are not responsible for your parents' emotional well-being. They are independent adults who have been on this earth for many more years than you. Adult children of emotionally immature parents. Give the series a read. Why do you make people more comfortable when you are uncomfortable? When talking about people pleasing and fawning. This is a great question to ask ourselves. I have a habit of people pleasing that I have been working to unlearn for a while. I read somewhere, don't set yourself on fire to keep others warm, and it really stuck with me. Edit. As far as I can tell, this quote is by Penny Reed, a writer who once wrote federal grants for biomedical research and now writes kissing books. I'm not quite sure what kissing books, as I haven't heard that term before, but I gather they are romance type novels. Stop trying to get everyone to agree when you need everyone to agree. The least agreeable person has all the power. Really changed my outlook on planning family events. Reminds me of the time a psychic told my mom that my late grandma was upset about something. My mom laughed and said my mom was the most stubborn woman on the planet. If she was here, she'd be upset about something. For context, I had a major B, seizures, strokes, and all around not a fun brain time when I was 28. You have to grieve the loss of yourself. Most people wanted me to go back to how I was. The fucked up truth is that part of my brain is dead. The person everyone, including myself, knew died. I needed to grieve the loss of myself. Big time advice for the disability community and people with severe chronic pain. We talk about it a lot in those subreddits. He said, claim the right to your space in the world. My self-esteem and self-worth was non-existent. I didn't believe I deserved the oxygen I was breathing. He was saying that being a person, being born, gives you the right to exist. You don't have to earn it. You're here, claim your space. The fact that some of us have to pay someone to even feel like we're worthy and not a waste of breath, while some people are just walking around with major egos, totally a-holes, narcissistic, that think they are God's gift, is truly something. And I'm the formal. Why do you think you're lazy? Then she listed off all the things she knows I'm doing for my family, my job, and my life. It kind of blew my mind when I struggled to come up with an example. She also described family dysfunction as water. Some families are messed up in a way that everyone can see the huge waves across the surface. Others are better at hiding it, but there's still a riptide that you can't see unless you're also in the water. Made me realize that trying to keep the surface from ever rippling doesn't erase what is happening underneath. You always talk about not wanting to do to your daughters what your mom did to you. You worry about it so much in every interaction you have ever had with them. But your children are 19 and 21 now. They are happy and healthy and they trust you because you've never abused them in any way. So I just want to validate for you that you really have broken that cycle of violence. You did that. And you should be proud of it. I'm proud of you for it. Validation is so powerful. My sister and I have spent hours validating each other once we realized that we rarely got it from our parents. We were both late 50s when we figured it out. Now I spread validation like fairy dust. That stuff is free, comes in all shapes and sizes, and allows people to grow like miracle grow does for flowers. That my job career is just a way to make money, it's not my life or identity. Took a lot of pressure off me. The amount of people in this world that feel like their workplace has to match them perfectly is astounding. It is a place to get money. It is not a place where everyone has to think the way you think, act the way you act, believe the way you believe, or look the way you look. It is a place that pays you for doing what they need you to do. That's it. Am I the only one lurking in the comments for free therapy? Not me. Just a therapist looking for a new great idea. How was anger expressed in your household growing up? Were you allowed to show anger? At which point I realized I wasn't allowed to show any negative emotions whatsoever, especially not in reaction to negative emotions from my parents. I had to learn this one for myself over years of internalizing everything and hating myself. I wasn't allowed to angry or upset. I was yelled at if I stood up to my big brother's bullying. I was made to believe I had to be strong and independent, yet was punished for being too independent. It was like I couldn't win, and that led to self-hatred. As I got older and lived alone, I learned I could stand up for myself and how to actually do that. At first it was so hard and I felt bad for it. But when I reflected on why is it I feel bad, I defended myself in that situation. I grew to love myself more, not beat myself up for everything, and become much happier. I was constantly bringing up how I felt like a completely different person after my mom died, like there was a remarked difference between before and after her death. But once she was asking about my hobbies, I got really into describing all the things I loved to do, or at least used to do, before I got into a deep depression. She was like, "Wow, you seem very passionate." And I just sat there like, well, I mean, I can't change what I like to do, they're still fun to do. And it's like she knew when to take a step back, cause it was like, wow, I may be super depressed about my mom passing, but I'm still me. I'm still my passions and those don't go away. IDK, maybe it only makes sense to be but it really started getting me back on track. Your mom is never going to be the parent you want or need, so stop expecting her to be and being mad that she isn't. Also, people who are addicts tend to get frozen at the time they started abusing drugs or alcohol, because their focus is their addiction and not developing as a person. So a person who started drinking heavily at 13 and quit at 30 would behave a lot like a 13-year-old. My wife phrased the first one as, adjust your expectations of others based on what they are able to give instead of what you'd want them to give. It's fairer towards them. Will worrying about it change the outcome? If the answer is yes, go ahead and worry about it. I suddenly realized that I couldn't think of a situation where the answer to that question was ever yes. Really short-circuited the worry cycle for me. It's the circle of concern, circle of influence thing. If you can't change the outcome, you have to accept it. Saved my sanity. Your mother was an absentee mother, so why would you think she would be anything other than an absentee grandmother to your child? It made me lower expectations of the type of relationship my child would have with my mom. So now she's the fun grandma on FaceTime that sends presents but never shows up, and I'm perfectly okay with that. Emotions are not bad, even the unpleasant ones. They all have an appropriate place. Yes. Mine said negative emotions are the brain's canary in a coal mine, a way to tip you off when something isn't right. Don't shoot the messenger, just ask yourself what is causing them. My counselor said to imagine myself as an orange. Then, consider that not all people like oranges. That doesn't mean that the orange is flawed in any way, not rotten, just that everyone has preferences. That helped ease my insecurities and need for people pleasing dramatically. If you literally laid down and let people walk all over you, someone would complain that you're not flat enough. Don't think of the relationship as over. Think of it as complete. Fundamentally changed how I was processing a tough breakup. So helpful. You complete me. Welp. Guess it's time, slaps knees and stands up, take it easy. Your urge to self-harm is perhaps a desire to tell those around you something that you don't know how to articulate. I've told people in sessions, sometimes, it's like screaming without opening your mouth. Also, your partner should enhance what you like most about yourself. It made dating so much easier. No need to settle for less than that. Your relationship should make your life better. I love that sentiment because better is a really subjective term. What's better for you won't be better for someone else. Can also be applied to any relationship, not just romantic ones. It was so simple, yet something I hadn't heard before. You didn't deserve that. Mine said this one time, and I think it was the first time I let myself grieve for what happened, as in wailing all my feelings out. It changes a lot when you realize it. A few years later a friend told me, I'm mad this happened to you, and it was the same feeling. He helped me understand grief in others better. That it was my own anxiety that made me want to fix and improve things for them. Instead I should just follow them on that ride and listen. I relate to this so much. I'll try just going along for the ride. I feel like a bad friend if I don't say anything, but I also feel like a bad friend if I say something wrong. I am here, always, and that's what's most important, I suppose. I used to say a lot of things I wanted to do and then follow up with, but it's hard. My therapist asked me one time how it would feel to say what I wanted to do and then say, and it's hard. I can't believe I hadn't considered that myself in 4 decades, but man, did it change my mindset on certain things. My partner is a therapist and she talks about how powerful it is in certain contexts, especially people who have chronic pain or are holding on to resentments. It's a way to acknowledge something sucks, but you don't have to be stuck by it. I'm angry about what happened and I'm doing the thing I need or want to do. There's nothing wrong with you. You are just picking the wrong people to be friends with. I got some new friends and my life changed pretty dramatically after that. How did you get the new friends? Not related, but thank you OP for asking this question. This has been insightful, and the best Reddit post I have ever seen after using this app for 8 years. Thank you. We judge ourselves by our intentions, and everyone else by their actions. Closely related, the correspondence bias, or fundamental attribution error, https://en.wikipedia.org/fundamental_attribution_error . We tend to assume others' bad behavior is caused by them being bad people, whereas we justify our own bad behavior by external circumstances that we cannot control. I told her I think I'm just a weak person. She drew a timeline of the last year on a whiteboard, and asked me what significant things had happened. I had 7 unrelated traumatic events unfold in that year, 2019, and I just stared at it. She told me most people only go through 1 to 3 traumatic events of that magnitude in their whole lifetime, and I cried. I didn't look at it and think wow life sucks for me. I looked at it and was amazed at my strength. Life kept throwing horrors at me, and yet there I was sitting in therapy still fighting. I still doubt my strengths, but whenever I remember that moment, I realize I am made of steel. Mine was about my relationship with my mother. He kept asking questions until I remember saying well I just stopped telling her anything about trusting her. My shoulders were instantly lighter. I see you have met my mom. I wish you well. Scaling that hurdle was big for me. And lonely. I am far less lonely now, but since she's my only remaining parent, I wish I could share more with her, but I know that's a fool's errand. I have a few. If one of your loved ones had this problem, what would you tell them? Boom. Self-compassion unlocked. Another one is regarding buried traumatic memories. If you buried some shit in the yard, then later thought oh I wonder what that was and dig it up, all you're going to find is some shit. Edit. I remembered another great one. Don't wait until you feel like yourself again so you can enjoy the things you used to enjoy. Do the things you used to enjoy until you feel like yourself again. Edit. Another one. I've been to a lot of therapy. No parent does the perfect job, so no parent does the complete job. Every adult needs to finish the job of parenting themselves. Probably the best one is that maintaining a relationship with certain people would be a service project. That I could do it if I wanted, but with the knowledge that it would be work and I wouldn't be able to expect reciprocity. And not to take on too many service projects. You can't control other people's crazy, but you can control your proximity to their circus. I don't want to take meds because I don't want to rely on drugs to feel okay. Don't you already do that? My therapist in the session before I finally saw a psychiatrist and got officially diagnosed with bipolar 2. I was heavily self-medicating at the time but of course didn't see it that way because it wasn't a prescription. That one hit deep. I've said the first line multiple times. No one has ever said the second. Wow. I was talking about my mother's behavior through my life and my upbringing in general. I often use it as a joke that I made my therapist say this. However, she followed it up by telling me that, considering all that had happened and the stuff I had been through, I was doing really well in life. I shouldn't be so hard on myself and needed to focus more on my positive achievements rather than letting my remaining flaws hold my focus. It's a moment I keep coming back to. It was also very cathartic to have a professional pretty much agree that my past life was nuts. Third party, professional validation delivers the best type of catharsis. At the end of my first therapy session. Do you realize you've said the word sorry 30 times in 50 minutes? And that's the day I stopped apologizing for taking up space. First session. Going over history, talking about how sad I am and how it affects my marriage, and after describing our relationship the counselor said, "Wow, you're really going through a lot of mental and emotional abuse." WT? Honestly, I didn't know it was a thing. She was right. It took me a few years, but I was able to get out. I was in my first session with a new therapist in less than 10 minutes and she says, "What in your childhood taught you that you didn't deserve love?" I was kind of like, whoa, can we build up slowly to that, geesh. At the time I was into getting tarot card readings and seeing psychics. My therapist told me he has psychic clients who come to him ashamed about the excessive amount of lying they do every day. Haven't been to a psychic or tarot card reader since. I have this idea for a movie where a therapist realizes that her clients listen to their psychics more than her, so she pretends to be a psychic and gives her clients sound advice but claims it comes from the stars or the cards or whatever. It seems like you have some kind of block in your brain, or something to that effect. I constantly struggled with motivation and accomplishing things, and regularly felt like I was paralyzed or stuck because my brain wasn't listening to me. It was amazing hearing someone put what I had been feeling into words, and acknowledging that there was an issue beyond me needing to try harder. Of course, I later found out that the block was in fact a symptom of ADHD, and it almost completely disappeared when I started ADHD meds a few years later. Executive dysfunction. I've had a lifetime of having issues with task initiation, amongst every other thing on the dang list. And once I clued in that I probably have ADHD, I learned to mentally toss my impulsivity at tasks. I never really know what I'll start doing in regards to the task, but I ride the wave and often get a chunk or two done. Speaking in a very slow and disappointed voice is better than shouting. After I beat up my middle school bully, my therapist congratulated me for standing up for myself. I thought she would chastise me like every other adult in my life, but she was encouraging. Obviously, she told me that violence like that wasn't the best way to handle it, but that making a stand was important either way. No one had ever told me that it was okay. I always got a lecture about not acknowledging bullies and telling the teacher instead, but we all know that never works. Having an adult validate me, even if I wasn't entirely right, was a huge boost. I feel this. The worst is being told they only bully you because you give them the reaction they want when you are literally never acting to them and they're simply obsessed with you and will never stop until they are stopped. That negative self-talk is just a part of you trying to help that needs some translation first. Like if I'm sitting there watching my 5th hour of TV and I keep hearing thoughts in my head about how I am such a lazy piece of shit, then I need to translate that into the intention, which is that it is probably a good idea to stop and do something else now. Now I can think about the negative self-talk as being on the same team and wanting the best for me. Whereas before I spent a lot of time first trying to ignore negative intrusive thoughts, then tried radical acceptance, then tried mindfulness techniques to quiet them, but nothing really worked and I continued to find them distressing. But now I can just stop and think, what is this negative thought really about and what is it really trying to tell me? So I end up reflecting more than average, and once I translate the thought I understand it and find it less troubling. What a great tool. I'm going to try this. Thank you so much for sharing. You may just be graduating high school and you're going to be a legal adult, but you're just a kid. It's not your responsibility to take care of everyone. It was never your responsibility. Because at the end of the day, you were just a kid wondering why you had to be the marriage counselor and shielding your brother from everything. I didn't know how much I needed to be reminded how I was a kid until that moment. It made sense though on why I often feel like time went by too fast and I didn't get to enjoy being a teen in high school, because I was too busy being an adult when it was never my responsibility. You don't attract the wrong people, you're just not good at filtering out the people who aren't good for you. It's okay to say no. You know too much to go back, you're too scared to go forward, and you're in too much pain to stand still. You don't feel your feelings, You intellectualize them. I now try to feel stuff in real time, which makes me much lighter. How do you do that? How do you get out of the intellectualizing and into the feeling? My therapist traced me on a big piece of paper, so I could see how big small I was. I thought him and I were about the same size. I got him to lay on top of the paper, and I disappeared. Seeing my size that way made my brain begin to think differently. It helped me realize I was not fat. At 5 feet 2 and 110 PDS, I needed to realize that. Years of bullying fucks with one's brain. That's an impressive result and experiment. I like it. When you use the words I should, you're silently finishing the sentence with, in order to be worthy of love and respect. Should is a much smaller part of my vocabulary now. Mine told me to stop shouldering on myself. That it's rarely helpful.